In times like this, silence is not an option. The stories shared in this video are more than personal. They are a cry from the heart of the persecuted church in Nigeria. Many believers are standing strong in the face of unimaginable suffering, and their voices must not be buried in the shadows. By sharing this video, you're helping their testimonies travel beyond borders, stirring hearts, and calling Christians everywhere to unite in prayer. Your simple act of sharing could be the spark that awakens someone to intercede fervently for our brothers and sisters in Christ. This is more than awareness. It's a movement of faith, compassion, and unity. Every share expands the circle of believers who can pray, speak up, and stand with the church in Nigeria. Let's raise a clear and undeniable sound together. Share this video with your friends, your church, and your community. Let the world know that the Church of God in Nigeria is not forgotten, and that together we can lift their hands through prayer and love. My name is Ruth. I was born and raised in Nigeria, but today I live in the United States as a journalist. Even though I live far away now, my heart is still back home. Every morning when I wake up, I reach for my phone with fear, wondering if another village has been attacked, another church burned, or another group of believers kidnapped. It's like living in two worlds, one where life goes on, and another where pain never stops. When I read the news, I see a lot about wars in different countries, but almost no one talks about what is happening to Christians in Nigeria. Since 2009, more than 125,000 Christians have been killed. This year alone, over 7,000 have been brutally murdered, many while they were simply going to church. Imagine people waking up on a Sunday morning, dressed in their best clothes, excited to sing and pray, not knowing it will be their last day on earth. I remember the first time I saw the pictures of a church that was attacked at night. The walls were black from smoke, chairs scattered everywhere, and Bibles burned into ashes. There was a woman crying outside, holding the hands of her two little children. She had lost her husband inside. I couldn't stop thinking, what if that was my family? Living in the U.S. gives me safety, but it also gives me a responsibility. I have a voice and I can speak. So today, I'm sharing this testimony, not as a reporter reading headlines, but as Ruth, a daughter of Nigeria, crying for her people. I will never forget the night that changed my life. I was still living in Nigeria then, working as a local reporter in the northern region. It was a quiet night, the kind that made you think nothing bad could happen. But around midnight, the sound of gunshots and shouting broke the silence. I could hear people running, crying, and calling out for help. I ran to the window and saw flames rising from the direction of the church. It wasn't just a fire, it was an attack. Armed men had entered the village while people were asleep. They moved from house to house, setting buildings on fire and shooting anyone who tried to escape. They shouted things I will never forget. Families hid in their homes, whispering prayers in the darkness. Some tried to flee through the back doors, but the attackers had surrounded the area. By morning, the village looked like a war zone. 22 people were dead, including children. The church was completely burned down. The smell of smoke and the cries of those who had lost everything filled the air. I saw a boy around 12 years old sitting in the ashes, holding his little sister's shoe. He kept repeating, "She didn't wake up." That image stayed with me. That was the night I realized my work was more than just reporting news. It became a mission to tell the world what was happening to Christians in Nigeria, because too many were suffering in silence and too few were listening. As I continued my work, I started focusing more on the hidden victims, the women and children. Their pain is deep, and their stories are often the hardest to tell. In many attacks, the men are killed on the spot, but the women and children are taken away. Sometimes they vanish completely, and their families never hear from them again. One day, I visited a small camp for displaced families. It was a crowded place made of broken tents and wooden shelters. The air was hot, and the children's faces were covered in dust. A woman named Esther shared her story with me. She whispered because she was still afraid. Armed men had invaded her village. They killed her husband in front of her and took her 2 teenage daughters. She searched for them for months but found nothing. Every night, she still prays for their return. There were many others like Esther. Some girls were rescued after months, but they came back with empty eyes, carrying pain no child should ever know. Some had been forced to deny their faith. Some were treated like property. Many never came back at all. And the children, so many of them are left as orphans. I met a small boy, about 6 years old, sitting alone. His parents were killed while they were singing in church. He didn't speak a word. He just held a burnt piece of paper that used to be part of his Sunday school book. That silence said more than any interview ever could. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We'd be honored to have you join this growing community of seekers and truth lovers. As you follow along with this powerful testimony of transformation, we invite you to engage with the community. Let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on how his journey resonates with you. Your reactions and comments help create a meaningful dialogue around life-changing experiences like these. As a journalist, I wrote these stories. But as Ruth, I cried after every visit. These were not strangers. They were my people. They were brothers and sisters in Christ. When I travel back home, one of the hardest sights to witness is a burnt church. These are not just buildings. They are places where families gather to worship, to celebrate weddings, to mourn together, to find peace. In many villages, the church is the heart of the community. But in Nigeria, over 19,000 churches have been destroyed. Some are reduced to piles of blackened bricks and twisted metal. Others are nothing but open spaces where grass grows over what once was holy ground. I remember visiting one such place in a rural area of Kaduna State. The entire roof had collapsed after the fire. The walls were stained with smoke, and the air still carried the smell of something that had been burned long ago. As I stood there, I saw an old woman sweeping the ashes with a broom. She told me she came every morning to keep the place clean because, in her heart, it was still the house of God. She had lost her son in that attack. Yet she refused to stop coming. At night, when attacks usually happen, people now sleep in fear. Families gather together in silence, whispering prayers instead of singing like they used to. Some keep their shoes close to their beds, ready to run into the forest at the first sound of gunfire. In some villages, Christians no longer ring the church bells because they fear it will draw attackers. The silence of those nights is heavy. It feels like everyone is holding their breath, waiting to see if they will live to see the morning. What hurts even more is how little of this reaches the outside world. News channels talk about other wars and crises for hours, but these stories often get ignored. It is as if the lives of these Christians don't matter as much. I have written reports, shared pictures, and spoken to international organizations, but most times, the response is slow or none at all. The silence from the world makes the silence in these villages even louder. Still, the faith of many believers remains unshaken. In some places, they gather under trees to pray. Some rebuild their churches with mud and bamboo after every attack. Others carry small hymn books in their pockets, ready to sing even if there are no walls to echo their voices. Their courage humbles me. They are not fighting with weapons, but with unbroken faith. Over the years, I have gathered so many stories that I sometimes feel like I carry the weight of hundreds of voices inside me. These are the voices of people the world rarely hears. There was a family in Benue State who lost everything in one night. Armed men came while they were praying during a night vigil. They locked the doors from the outside, set the building on fire, and waited. By morning, 23 worshippers were gone. Only 2 people survived, both with severe burns. When I met one of them in the hospital, he held my hand and whispered, "Tell them we were praying when they came." Another time, I visited a school that had been completely destroyed. The blackboards were broken, the desks turned into firewood, and the walls covered with holes from bullets. That school had been teaching children Christian values, reading, and songs. It was one of the 10,000 Christian schools that have been attacked or destroyed across Nigeria. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine the laughter of children that once filled that place. Now, only silence and fear remain. What makes these attacks more painful is how organized they are. Groups like Boko Haram, ISWAP, and others plan their operations carefully. They target Christian villages, burn farms, seize land, and force people to leave. Many Christians have become refugees in their own country, moving from one unsafe camp to another. Some live in overcrowded shelters with no clean water or proper food. Many children have stopped schooling because it's too dangerous to gather in one place. Even though I now live in America, every time I open my messages, I receive new reports. Another village attacked, another pastor kidnapped, another family missing. Sometimes it happens so often that people begin to treat it like just another headline. But these are real lives. Mothers, fathers, children, grandparents, they all have names, dreams, and faith. It breaks my heart to see their suffering treated like background noise. I have written countless articles, spoken on television, and joined international forums. But often, people look at me with surprise, as if they didn't know such things were happening. That reaction alone tells me how invisible this crisis has become. And that is why I refuse to stop speaking. I'm not just telling stories, I am fighting against silence. There was a time when I almost gave up. The stories were too heavy, the images too painful. One evening, after receiving news of another mass killing in Plateau State, I sat alone in my small apartment in the U.S. The room was quiet, but inside me there was a storm. I stared at my laptop screen, reading reports about children burned in their homes, pastors kidnapped, and families wiped out. I covered my face and cried. I felt helpless. I wondered if my words could ever make a difference. But something happened that night. As I sat there praying, I felt a deep presence surround me. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. In that quiet moment, God revealed to me that my voice, no matter how small, was part of His plan. He let me know that I was not fighting alone, that He sees every tear, every burnt church, every broken family. It gave me strength. It reminded me that this work was not just about reporting facts, it was about being a light in the darkness. From that day, I stopped hiding my emotions in my reports. I began to speak not just as a journalist but as a witness. When I talked about villages attacked at night, I spoke as someone who has walked those roads. When I described mothers searching for their kidnapped children, I spoke as someone who had held their hands and prayed with them. My voice carried both truth and pain, and I believe that made people listen more deeply. Faith in Nigeria is both powerful and tested. I have met believers who sing hymns while hiding in the bush during attacks. I have seen pastors return to burned churches, lift up their hands, and pray for their attackers. Their faith is not free of fear. They are human, but their faith is stronger than their fear. It is the kind of faith that shakes hearts and draws tears from those who hear their testimonies. I often tell myself that if they can keep believing under such terrible pressure, then I can keep speaking. Fear tries to silence, but faith pushes us forward. I am learning every day that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means standing even when your knees are shaking. Some of the most heartbreaking moments I've experienced have been inside the camps where displaced Christians are trying to survive. These camps are usually overcrowded, built from torn tarpaulins, sticks, and old pieces of cloth. They are hot during the day and cold at night. There's little food, and diseases spread easily. Many people in these camps once had farms, homes, and churches. Now they sleep on the ground, waiting for a day when it will be safe to return. I met a little girl named Blessing who was about 9 years old. She sat quietly outside one of the tents, holding a small cross made from 2 sticks tied together. She told me that her father had built their church, and her favorite song was the one they used to sing every Sunday morning. When their village was attacked, her parents were killed, and she ran with other children into the forest. She was found 2 days later, dehydrated and terrified. As she spoke, she didn't cry. Her eyes were tired, like someone much older than her age. There are many children like Blessing in these camps. children who have seen things no child should ever witness. Some wake up screaming at night. Others refuse to talk at all. The women try to comfort them with songs and prayers, even when they themselves are broken inside. Some of the men try to rebuild temporary places of worship with wood and cloth, turning small corners of the camp into spaces of hope. When they gather to pray, their voices rise together, soft but strong, filling the air with faith instead of fear. I also spoke with a pastor who had lost his entire congregation in a single attack. He now moves from tent to tent, encouraging people to keep believing. He said something that stayed with me: "If we stop praying here, then the enemy has already won." His words were not loud, but they carried weight. In that moment, I understood that these camps were not just places of suffering. They were also places where faith was being refined. Walking through those camps, I often felt torn between two emotions: deep sorrow and quiet admiration. Sorrow for the pain these people endure, and admiration for their unshaken trust in God. They have lost everything, yet they still gather to worship. Their cries are real, their wounds deep, but their faith stands like a flame in the dark. These are the voices I want the world to hear.